Yes, you can see a progress of water that comes from the mountains since 2,000 years. No one knows the source. It just continues. It was one of the main sources of Smyrna back in the Roman Hellenistic period. And still today, water just continues. They still can't find the source. They still can't find it. It was way back behind the mountains there.
You know, listener, there is a spring in Smyrna whose source no one has ever found. It has sustained the city for millennia. People have traced it, they've studied it, they've argued about it for centuries, and still no one can pinpoint where it begins. Homer was named after the river it feeds. He supposedly sat at its edge and composed the Iliad and the Odyssey. The water was there before the poems. The source was already a mystery. I think about that spring when I think about Smyrna, a city built on something real, something life-giving, and the source of it all hidden in plain sight. This is the church that was told, I know your tribulation, I know your poverty, and I know something you don't. You are rich, a hidden source, a hidden wealth, a city that didn't know what it was sitting on. Welcome to Smyrna on this episode of God's Power Stories as we continue our series in the margins. Does God seem hateful to you, like he's looking for ways to trip you up? Does the thought of opening his word seem daunting and intimidating? Hi, I'm Anna, your host for God's Power Stories, where we connect with God's love through the power of his stories. I believe that God loves us more than we can comprehend, and we experience that love through stories. If you're here to connect through stories about the power of God, with the wind of the Holy Spirit at your back, you're in the right place. Let's let God light our path so we can take that next step toward the fullness of life he has planned for us. Grab your cup of coffee, that Diet Coke, or flavored water. Breathe. Let's dig in to God's Power Stories. Okay, so before we ever get to Smyrna, we have to talk about the hotel, because after 2 days of travel, we were done. I mean, the word exhausted doesn't even cover it. And what happened next was either a comedy of errors or divine appointment in patience, possibly both. So, John, I want you to kind of set the scene for us a little bit. We had just arrived at the hotel. First of all, what'd you think of the hotel when we came in?
It was very nice. It was large and clean, and most of them that we go to are pretty elegant hotels. I mean, not top of the notch Trump Tower, but I mean, they're definitely a little bit higher end hotel.
Yeah. And what was your state of mind and body at that point?
I was exhausted,
Mhm.
and I didn't have much patience, and I just wanted to go to bed.
Yeah. We hadn't eaten dinner yet. I don't even
No.
know what time it was. I think it was like 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So, yeah, we were completely exhausted. And we were also the very first ones in the group to get our keys. Do you remember when Sinan handed us the card that had our keys in it?
Yeah, I remember, him giving you the card.
And then we got to the elevator. Do you remember that man that got in the elevator just before us with the bathrobe on?
I don't, but that surprises me.
I think he must have come from the spa.
Probably. Maybe he had a beauty day.
Right. And I just remember thinking, he was by himself, so there was plenty of room in the elevator for 3 people, but I didn't know if we should get on or not, or if it would be offensive to him if we told him to go on, and so we both hopped in the elevator with him, and it was really clear by his silence that he would have preferred that we wait, is my feeling on it. I remember us trying to make a little bit of small talk with him, and he was stoic. He was silent. He was not looking at us. So that was something, but we finally did get to the floor. We were the very first people on our floor from our tour because we were the very first people who got keys. And we go to our door. Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, we couldn't get the key to work, which I'm not new to that. I've done that several times. I know you ran down to the desk and back at least twice
Mm-hmm.
trying to get some help.
Yeah, I remember the very first time. Well, we got a light, we got a blue light. So I thought, well, maybe that's what you get before the door opens up. So I got the blue light. I knew that at least it was working or it was juiced up or whatever. So I tried to open the door and couldn't get it to open. So I didn't know if we had done something wrong or what. And meanwhile, people are coming upstairs that are from our tour and said, oh, you guys beat us and all that. And we were like, yeah, but we still can't get into our room because the door doesn't seem to open. And there were other people near us and they said, well, we got right into our room. And I said, well, come here and try it on this door to see if you can get it to work. And he said, okay, there's the blue light. Oh no, it doesn't work. It's locked. It's not working. So that's when I went down to the desk. I left you upstairs with all of our baggage so that we didn't have to lug it all back down again and went up to the desk and we everywhere that we traveled, people really worked hard at doing their English, and actually they did a whole lot better than I would have been able to do their language, so definitely not knocking them. But I tried to explain that these keys aren't working, and so she understood that pretty quickly, the lady at the desk. There were two people working, and she got me a new set of two keys. So I went back up to the room and tried them again, and they didn't work. And about that time, our tour guide was with us, the man who had arranged the entire trip. We keep trying the key and trying the key and trying the key and keep jiggling the handle. And all of a sudden, a man starts yelling from the other side of the door. And he said something like, "Who is there?" or something like that. Do you remember that?
I heard him, but I was standing away a little bit and I didn't hear what he said, but I knew somebody was in there.
Yeah. And so, of course, that was super startling. And I thought, well, I want to get him to open the door. So I have to, like, not sound too irate or frustrated or impatient or anything like that. And I can't remember what I said, but that man never answered me. So now I'm starting to freak out a little bit because I'm thinking, if there's a man in our room, is there even a room for us? So that's when our tour guide said, well, let me go down with you. And he stood beside me as I tried to explain what was happening to the same lady that had given us the other keys. And she went immediately to try to give us another set of keys. And I said, no, no, no. I said, I need keys to a room that is vacant.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And she didn't understand what that meant. And so this other man came up that was working behind the desk, and he said, "You need more keys?" And I said, "Nope, I don't need more keys. I went to use these keys." And a man yelled out for me, a man that I do not know, yelled out from inside the room. So that room is already occupied by someone I don't know. "Oh, you need 2 rooms?" "No, I don't need 2 rooms." So right about then, the manager came up, and English was not his first language, but I explained it to him, and he seemed to be understanding what I was saying. And he said, "Can I see your keys?" Which was still in the little cardboard card thing that they put the keys in. So we were originally told that the room was number 1276, 1276. And when I looked at it, the 6 looked a little weird, but I saw the loop in it the way you'd have a 6. So this is the room we had been trying, is 1276. Once he looked at the cardboard, he said, "Oh, this does not say 1276, this says 1274." So when they had done the 4, they had done it and put a loop in it. So I said, "Oh, 1274," and then everyone behind the counter, "Oh, yeah, so sorry, 1274." So here we were, the poor man on the other side of that door. He never did come out, so I have no idea what he thought. But that's kinda how we started our trip. That was our very first night of lodging in a hotel because up until then, we'd been on airplanes the entire time. So, thankfully, it was a beautiful hotel. As tired as I was, I did not wanna go down to eat. I remember you saying, "We gotta get something to eat." So we did, but we couldn't really appreciate the hotel at that point because we were just too tired. And I will say too, with regard to our tour guide, Sinan, this is a man who I remember when we first got on the bus in Turkey, another guide was there, and he said, "You guys don't understand." And of course, I'm speaking more in English slang, but he said it better than I'm saying it now. But pretty much, you all don't understand the level of guide that you have here, the guy that's going to be on your bus with you. This man has been nominated, voted on, published in major travel magazines for being one of the best tour guides, maybe the best tour guide in Turkey. He has guided people like George and Laura Bush, Madeleine Albright. You guys are in great hands being with Sinan. Well, he might have been great as a tour guide, but he could not read the number on the card any better than I could because he was the one who told me that it was room 1276. And the really funny thing is, after everything was done and after we came back upstairs, Sinan happened to be there. And I said, "We were working on the wrong room this whole time. We should have been in room 1274, not in room 1276." And he looked at the card and he says, "Oh, yes, it says 1274. I'm sorry you couldn't read it right." Anyway, at least he was a good tour guide. So,
Yeah, he never stopped sharing information, whether we were on the bus or, walking between things or whatever. He always had something to tell you about things that probably a normal guy or a guy that hasn't done it as long as him would think to tell you about.
right.
Very, 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 very knowledgeable.
Yep. Yep. We finally got into our hotel room and we slept like rocks. And the next morning we went into Smyrna. Now, Smyrna is actually the city we were in right then, because if the listeners will remember from earlier conversations, we originally flew into Istanbul and then we had a short flight over to Izmir. Well, Izmir is the same thing as Smyrna. It's just the modern day name is Izmir, and back in the day it was Smyrna. So it isn't just name on a map. It's actually a city with a story that goes back thousands of years. It's one of the largest cities in modern Turkey, and it's actually gorgeous there. I don't know if you remember, John, but when we landed in Istanbul, it was about the temperature of what it was in Chicago. And we flew 2 hours away into Izmir, or Bible times Smyrna, and it was like a tropical paradise. And I remember our guide talking about that, how it's almost like going from Chicago to Florida in the United States. It's just very beautiful. It is warm, and it's warm all year long. They never get any snow. They never have any bad weather. They might get rainstorms or something, but they definitely don't have any problems with cold temperatures or anything like that. But the history underneath the city is staggering. The earliest settlement here goes back to the third millennium before Christ. 5,000 years of human history under one city. By the time of the early church, Smyrna had a population of close to 100,000 people. It was one of the most important port cities in all of Asia Minor, rivaled only by Ephesus, which we'll visit in another few days. It had a stadium, it had a theater, it had temples to Homer and Sybil. And Sybil sounds like a pretty nasty goddess. We'll get into that in a little bit more in the next few episodes. But anyway, 200 years before Christ, Rome granted Smyrna the honor of building the very first temple to the goddess Roma, a reward for standing with Rome against its enemies. Smyrna had a long, deep loyalty to Rome, which made it a very dangerous place to be a Christian. And Sinan, our guide, started talking about the Ottoman Empire. Do you remember much what he said about that, John? That was new information that I'd never really heard before.
Yeah, he was clearly very proud of his country and its history.
Yeah, I just remember him talking about the fact that the Ottoman Empire used to encompass, I want to say he said 2/3 of the world. And they just kept growing and growing and growing and bigger and more powerful and more powerful. In fact, when we went on this trip, we were in 2 continents. We were in Asia and we were also in Europe because Turkey is in Asia Greece is in Europe, but all of Greece and all that part of Europe used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. So I really liked listening to Sinan because I felt like he was really proud of where he had come from. And he told me things that either I never learned in school or I had glossed over because I had no idea how the Ottoman Empire was going to affect me. But it sounds like it was a really big and powerful empire. And then people just began to find chinks in the armor and they began to go up against the Ottoman Empire. And so little by little, the Ottoman Empire lost more and more territories to the point that it became non existent over time. And when you look at a city like this, modern day Izmir, biblical times Smyrna, the layers of it, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, modern Turkey, what does that do to your understanding of how history moves?
Well, empires rise and fall. Every single one of the Lydians conquered Smyrna, then the Persians, then Alexander the Great, who, according to tradition, dreamed he was told by the goddesses to rebuild the city. And so he did. Then Rome, then Byzantines, then Arabs, then Ottomans. Every empire that has ever stood has eventually fallen. And yet the Church of Smyrna is still being talked about, still being visited, still changing people. There's something to that.
Very good, Johnny. Wow. You really rattled that off. I didn't know you knew so much about it. Of all the 7 churches in Revelation, 7 real congregations, real people, real cities. Jesus had something corrective to say to almost every single one. Almost. But Smyrna is one of only 2 churches that received no rebuke whatsoever. Not one correction, not one, but I have this against you type of a phrase. Only this. Jesus said in Revelation, I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. I know the slander of those who claim to be Jews and are not. Do not be afraid of anything you are going to suffer. The devil will throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and you will face an ordeal for 10 days. Remain faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. The crown of life. Scholars point out that the crown or wreath was the most common image on the coins issued in Smyrna. It was the prize given to athletes who won their contests in the gymnasium. Now, Jesus was speaking directly into their world. He was saying, there is a prize coming, and it is worth everything. John, when you heard this explained while standing right there in Smyrna, how did you feel? What came to your mind?
Well, the letter says they'll face an ordeal for 10 days. Scholars believe this may refer to the gladiatorial games, spectacles where Christians were sometimes martyred before the games even began. Does knowing that make the letter feel different to you?
It does. It makes it feel like, number one, Jesus really understood where they were coming from. It made me think about the fact that whatever we're going to suffer in this world, it's not going to be forever. Everything has an end to it except eternity. In a way, I mean, who likes to know that they're going to be involved in an ordeal for 10 days? Nobody really. But we know that there's a reason for it if God is in it. There's nothing that happens to us that is by chance. There's nothing that happens to us that God didn't know was coming. There's nothing that's a surprise to God. If something happens to us that we might consider bad, if we look at it in the eyes of God, there's a reason for it. And if He allowed it, there's a reason for it. And so, although it might still not be easy to have those times of tribulation, at least we know that God is in it and that His name will be glorified through it and that He will make all things work together for good to those who love Him and who are called according to His purpose. But then there's someone named Polycarp, and I don't know if you remember hearing about him or not when we were there, but he lived roughly from the year 69 to 156 AD, which means he was alive when the Apostle John was still alive. He is thought to have been personally converted by John, appointed by John as the bishop of Smyrna. So he had a huge history there. So when you read the letter to Smyrna in Revelation, Polycarp was likely there. He may have heard it read aloud for the very first time, because if you think about it, all these letters that John wrote down in Revelation, yes, it was for us to read all these many years later, but it was also written so that these letters could be delivered to those churches, which is really kind of cool to think about and something I didn't really think about before this trip. Now, Polycarp led that church in Smyrna for decades through persecution, through suffering, through the constant threat of death. And finally, as an old man, the Roman authorities came for him. He was brought into the stadium, and the proconsul gave him a choice. He could take an oath to the emperor, he could curse Christ, and they would let him live. But this was Polycarp's answer. For 86 years, I have been his servant, meaning God's servant, and he has never done me wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? They sentenced him to death by burning. But here's what the historical account says, and this is from a letter written by the church in Smyrna itself to another church describing what they witnessed. It goes like this. He was in the center of the flames, not like a human being burned, but like a loaf of bread baking in the oven, or like a gold or silver ingot being refined in the furnace. And we became aware of a delicious fragrance, like the odor of incense or other precious gums. The fire didn't consume him. Eventually, they had to stab him. And the account says that Polycarp went to his death with a look of joy on his face. John, what do you do with that?
He's never done me wrong. After 86 years, after everything Polycarp walked through, that was his testimony. The letter to Smyrna says the victor will receive the crown of life and will not be hurt by the second death. Polycarp lost his early life, but by the measure, did he win or lose?
Good. And then Jonathan started teaching right there in the city of Smyrna. He brought up the menorah, that 7-branched lampstand that we see. Most people know it as a Jewish symbol. I mean, you and I have been to Israel. We saw a huge menorah. But Jonathan pointed something out that reframed everything for me. He said the official seal of Israel, not the Star of David on the flag, but the official seal is the menorah. And the menorah is also the symbol used in Revelation for the church. And so that means the symbol of Israel and the symbol of the church are the same symbol. They're joined together. And then he said this, if you are born again, you are a child of Israel in the spirit. You are a child of Abraham. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, grafted in, heirs of the same promise. And then he said something I keep coming back to, something that felt like it was written for Smyrna specifically. He said, we are the light of the world, and we shine, especially when it gets dark. John, standing in that city where Polycarp refused to go dark, when you heard that, what did you think?
The menorah doesn't shine brightest in a well-lit room. Polycarp didn't go out when they tried to extinguish him. Do you think it's a coincidence that Jonathan taught that in this city?
I don't think it was a coincidence at all. I think it was very well planned. I think the Lord led him to it.
Smyrna was a city that suffered, a church that was poor by every outward measure and rich by every measure that actually counts. A bishop who stood in a stadium, looked at death in the face and said, he has never done me wrong, and a teaching about light delivered at the very city that proved it. Whatever feels like it's trying to extinguish you, you were made to shine in it, not in spite of it, in it. Next week we move on, but I'll be honest, Smyrna stayed with me. I think it might stay with you too.
Hey, real quick, if this episode blessed you in some way, I'd love it if you leave a written review for the show over on Apple Podcasts. These are like gold to me. Reviews help me know what you enjoy while providing insight on what you want to learn about. Also, take a screenshot of your review or this episode so that you can share it on your Facebook or Instagram stories. For Facebook, tag me at Anna Moore Bradfield Author. For Instagram, use Anna Moore Bradfield. When I share you back in my stories, both our lights will shine a little brighter. May you witness God's power in your life today, my friend.